Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I am good. Cold.
I know. This we were talking about this earlier that the winter is wintering this year.
Yeah.
It is on it is set to winter mode and it doesn't seem to be coming off that pedal.
And I didn't mention this, but I mean, I don't know if you can tell. You can't really see the cinder block walls behind the bookshelves, but I'm in the basement. And all of our space heaters have crept out this winter. We had like 3 at some point, and they've all died over the course of the season. So at some point, I won't feel my fingers anymore.
Oh,
Right now, we're good.
okay. Well, let's keep it moving and maybe the excitement of talking will help. But hello to you, Alex, and I'm Nicole, and this is our high school required reading challenge, book number 8 out of 10.
I just have to say how proud I am of us for like getting through this list, because we started this when? Over the summer.
July, August? Ooh, I feel like it was maybe August because I feel like it was before school started.
I was thinking June. So at some point in the summer, we started this, and like we've kept a pretty steady pace of getting through these books on our list, and we've gotten, I think, now to like the hard end of the list.
We did not make it. We did not order this to end on like easy note.
No.
I mean, we're ending with Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
So that's like hard in a totally
Yeah.
on all sorts of levels. But anyway, yeah, so this is book 8 of 10. And if you don't know what we're talking about, basically, Alex and I have been doing a high school required rereading challenge, basically, where we have been going back and we have read, well, the plan in total is to read 10 books. 5 of them were books that Alex was required to read in high school, and 5 of them were books that I was required to read in high school. And initially, we did this as recorded videos, but we decided to start live streaming them. But other than showing the cover of our books, we intend this to be done sort of podcast style where you can just kind of listen along as you do other things. But it is fun having it as a live show because we can then interact with you live in the chat, or you can leave comments afterwards. And yeah, it's just been a really good time, I have to admit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been fun to also see like the difference of like what my school had assigned compared to yours. There's also that element of like, I don't have fond memories of this book, but now coming back to it, I'm receiving things in a different way. So
yeah. Or this is what I remember of the book, and then reading it and going, oh, did I read this book?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is fun to see the difference between ours. And one of the questions I most frequently get asked when I tell people about our challenge and then I mention to them some of the books, people are like, where did you guys go to school? They're like, I don't think I read that in school. And I was like, well, yeah. And we intentionally chose books that, for the most part, the other one of us hadn't read in high school. So but before we get to today's book, let me say hi, and we can say hi to everybody who has joined. So Stephanie joined us. Hello. You were too intimidated and didn't start the Odyssey, but excited to hear our thoughts. Well, great. And hopefully by the end, you'll feel less intimidated.
I was also very intimidated going in. And so we'll get into like what our choices were in terms of translations and format. But I already sense I'm going to be revisiting this.
Yeah. So that is totally fair. And, the other thing I will say about that is, we will be sharing spoilers in this, but we don't tend to get into a lot of the plot of the book, but there may be things that we mention that are spoilers. But I feel like at the very least, this book is so much in the popular imagination.
Yeah, that's been around for a really long time.
Yeah. If we're spoiling it, it should be something that encourages you to read the book so that you know the difference between that and the movie, the song, the opera, the whatever it is that you see. Hello, Doug. Nice to see you. And hello to Britta. You've never read this particular translation. Okay, so you're curious to hear our thoughts. And we will talk about translations because Alex and I did not read the same translation. And Kurt was saying hi to everybody. And Doug was saying, or Stephanie was saying hi to Doug and Kurt. I'm getting everybody's names mixed together. You're going to be like Dekerfany by the end. Except then that leaves Britta out. And hellos all around. And then Kurt was saying, perhaps more appropriate to the Iliad, you have only one question. Why isn't she called Helen of Sparta? You know, not having read the Iliad recently, I couldn't tell you, but I feel like I remember thinking that same thing. And Kurt was saying to Doug, thanks for letting me know. Glad you found out. Hello, Black Widow. Hello to you. Helen is a trip no matter the city. Yes, yes, yes. All right. So if it's not obvious, the book that we're discussing today is the Odyssey, and we always start by showing our covers. So here they are.
Yep. So mine is a prose translation by W.H.D. Rouse. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no poetic structure at all in this one.
Mm-hmm. And I read the Robert Fitzgerald translation, which is in the form of, if I can show you a page that doesn't have my notes on it, is in the form of epic poetry. So it is, you know, you have the stanzas and line numbers and that kind of thing. And I do have a little information about you for you guys in case you're not totally familiar with the Odyssey, which is absolutely fair. It was composed in around 8th or 7th century BCE and is attributed to Homer, one of his 2 works of epic poetry, the other one having been the Iliad, which some people would see as like part 1 of the story, with the Odyssey being part 2. It is thought that they were composed separately and not necessarily as a 2-part series or anything like that. But what happens in the Iliad does happen before the Odyssey, which is basically the Trojan War, which Odysseus is involved in. And then the Odyssey is following Odysseus, who fought for 10 years in the Trojan War, and it's following him on his very long and extended journey back home from the war. And one of the questions that comes up a lot when you mention the Iliad and the Odyssey is, do you have to read the Iliad or do you have to read it first in order to read the Odyssey? And I would say absolutely not.
No. But getting back into the idea that like this is so, there's such old stories, and so just like within like this popular sort of, they've been adapted, they've been integrated into other stories. I feel like as long as you're familiar with the Trojan War, you don't have to, and by familiar, and like just know that there was a war, Helen was involved, and there was a horse.
Right. Yeah, like it's something you could look up a summary on, but the elements of it and a lot of the background does get repeated in here, which I think is why what Alex is saying would be helpful. But there is a lot of repetition of what they're talking about, and it does get semi-explained. So I don't feel like you're going to get lost. You just might miss what some of the things are that they're alluding to. So, and then Kurt real quick was saying his question came from John Barth in Lost in the Funhouse. And he has 7 translations of the Odyssey, fewer of the Iliad. And
have you read them all?
Yeah.
That's because I definitely want to know if you have a favorite translation.
Yeah. And if anybody else has read a translation that's different than this that they love, please share. Mm-hmm. Then again, that might get us all 7 of the translations eventually. Maybe the shorter list is one you really hated.
Which I'm trying to tell myself, like, don't do that. Don't start collecting all of the Odyssey translations, because I already have a little project where I was collecting Beowulf translations and intending to read a bunch of different Beowulf translations, and I need to focus one at a time.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you there. Yeah. I was, before we started reading this, and at the very start, very tempted to get a whole bunch of translations of it. After having read that, I don't feel that way anymore, but I'll talk about that probably more at the end. But yeah, I will say I really enjoyed the translation I read. Like I'm glad I picked this one. I did look at excerpts from multiple translations and did a little work before choosing this one. So this was the one that I wanted to start with, and I was happy with that. Were you happy with your translation?
I was not. So I picked this translation because it was the one that was available at my Friends of the Library bookstore. So that's as much thought as went into that. And so when we were getting closer to reading it, and I looked up the translator, and basically what I saw was that this is considered a very good, almost like introduction, or like a less intimidating way to approach it. It's very plain English. Yeah, so if you're intimidated by the idea of reading it in verse, this is the way to go. So I felt good about going into it this way. And then very quickly realized I think I would have preferred a prettier verse version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, as we go, I feel like this particular translation is almost too nice to Odysseus. But we can get into that as we discuss the story.
Yeah. And maybe we can get more into what you didn't like about it and what we did like about our translations when we talk about our favorite and least favorite things. And just to get back to the comments real quickly, Doug was saying the problem with big brained translation comparisons is some egghead will ask you, why didn't you just read it in Greek? Right. Because I don't know Greek. So, especially not ancient Greek. Oh, Kurt's going to learn Greek, though. There you go. Take the egghead title. Oh my gosh. And I did mention that I did compare translations and think about them. I actually am pretty sure that I watched Benjamin McEvoy. He is also a booktuber, and he has a really good video series where he will talk a lot about translated classics. And for some of the books, he'll even do a video that he typically calls "Which Translation of Fill in the Blank." And so I watched his video. So I will link that in the description box below later. I didn't think to do that already, but I also dropped it in the chat for you guys.
So I will have to send you a link to include also. I found a video that is a husband and wife who were on a journey of reading this together. And they're both academics, I think. And so I have read multiple translations, and they have a video that says, if you like this, read this one. If you want this approach, read this one. And so they broke it down really well also.
Yeah, he does that. He tends to do that kind of thing as well. Like, and he'll also give you usually like he'll read out and put on the screen the same excerpt from different translations. So two really good resources if you're trying to figure out a translation that you might like. And it's interesting. It will vary widely what you get in your translations, because this was, as far as scholars can tell, originally part of an oral tradition. And so it's interesting to see in the translations how closely they stick to some aspects of the oral translation, such as repetition, because to memorize an entire epic storytelling, you're going to need some repetition in there. Britta was saying that she read a prose version first and then the Fagel verse translation. most recently Emily Wilson's, which is also in verse. And the last one is the first time you actually enjoyed the book. Ooh.
Yeah, so Emily Wilson's translation is the one that is on my radar. And I know she intentionally wrote it in, did she do iambic pentameter when she translated it? I think she did. So like she focused very much on the meter as well. And so like it got to a point where I kind of wanted that rhythm and poetry to the story, because the prose translation I read, for not keeping it in a poetic structure, he stuck to some of those devices that an oral tradition uses, like the epithets and the repetition. Or I was like, if you're going to like change the structure, then lose the devices that are necessary to that, because it started
like
feeling
if you're going to change a play into a novel, please take out the stage directions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because otherwise it's going to be
because in other words, like it was just brick of text. It's not like the nice, like, you know, slim margins that don't feel as daunting. But
yeah. And then Stephanie was asking about a website that deals with translations that I've mentioned before, and that is We Love Translations. As far as I know, so far, they have not done a which translation of the Odyssey, but that is a website that's really good.
I did look on there and I did not see an Odyssey.
Yeah, they're still working on them. I think they have a spot on your website where you can like put in suggestions of things. So if that's one you'd really like to see them do, I'm sure they'd be open to it. I'm sure they've considered it. And the version that Stephanie has and didn't read is prose, and it just looked so dense you think you might prefer verse. Yeah. So maybe our conversation on that would help.
Yeah, I thought this would feel less intimidating, and it ended up kind of just feeling like a drag.
Okay, good to know. So maybe your hunch on that was right, Stephanie.
I would look for verse.
So we've kind of talked about it, but again, I'll go over a quick synopsis of the story, which is the Odyssey is basically telling the story of Odysseus, his journey to return home after participating in the Trojan War, which again, you can see the Iliad for that if you want Homer's take on that. It includes Odysseus's trials, his travails, his heartache on his journey home, but it also includes, and I feel like you rarely hear this talked about or see this in popular culture, where it talks about what is going on back home in Ithaca, where he's from, and the trials that are faced by his wife and son in his absence, his wife being Penelope and his son being Telemachus, which I feel like, thanks to more modern retellings of this story, you hear their names come up more frequently than you were for a while. The book also discusses who I felt like was the super powerful and overly prevalent Athena, goddess of wisdom, warcraft, handicraft, and all the things. I feel like in a lot of the pop culture references to this book, you also hear very little about Athena's involvement in it, and she is very involved in this story.
Very hands-on.
Yep. I actually at one point I was like, and the hero of the story is Athena. Way to go.
Yeah. To the point where even Zeus, who likes to meddle with humans, was like, Athena, come on. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
You want to do this, or you want to leave it alone?
Right. Like, come on, make up your mind. Yeah. So, and the intent and themes in the book have to do with a word that's come up a lot: journey, homecoming, returning. Specifically, the Greek word for homecoming and returning is used very frequently, as is the word for guest and friendship. And Alex and I talked a lot about how the idea of hospitality and how you treat strangers was very, very important in this book and in the culture. Like, that very much comes across in how this story is told. And I felt like the book was like in terms of purpose was like part entertainment and part tutorial and life lessons on like the old ways, the good traditions of like the yesteryears.
Yeah, and it ends up almost being like a travel guide. Like if you go to someone else's place, you know,
A manners book.
yeah, it's an etiquette.
Homer's Book of Etiquette.
Yeah, or if you're
Warfare.
hosting, make sure you give your guests gifts.
Yeah, exactly. And Britta did confirm that Emily Wilson's is iambic pentameter, but she tries to use everyday language because, in her opinion, this was not snobby language literature, but an oral performance for normal people. Yep. And there is, I do not remember his name and I really struggled to find it, but there is one author who has translated the Greek and he intentionally translated the book to in a way so that it both the formatting and the word choice and the way it could be read could go back to the oral tradition and made it so that it would be much easier for people today to actually orally perform the book. And he apparently goes around the country. I don't know if he still is, but he goes around and he actually performs and like orally tells the entire story. And his was actually the other translation I thought about reading, but I was struggling to get my hands on it. And I didn't find it in time for us to read it this time. But
I have a question, maybe you know. Given that tradition, the oral tradition, and it being performed to an audience, is this like a one-day event, or is this like a come back tomorrow to see what happened, or like, because how long and how, like, what attention span? Obviously there was no like TikTok scrolling, so I guess people had longer attention spans. But was this like an event? Was this like a one-day thing? Because
you know, it's been a couple of years since I looked at him talking about that. But I know when he does it, he doesn't do the whole thing in one go. Like he'll do certain parts of the story depending on the setting and as he gets to understand his audience and that kind of thing. So I'm imagining that the same probably would have been true, but I really don't know that much about the oral tradition and how it would have played out like in real time in real life. I get the sense just from within the text itself that it would be more like, okay, tell me this story. Let's hear that part again. Because I know he said that that's a key element of why there's those like repeated hooks in there, is that part of it is to help you be able to continue the story, but part of it is also to help you like get back into the story. Like if you've put it down and you pick it back up to provide those natural breaks. So I'm thinking like the repetition of the idea of the sunrise, I'm guessing would be a natural starting point. But I don't 100% know that. So if somebody else has more thoughts or ideas on that, feel free to share. Doug's question was, in Homer's time, was this presented to mostly the rich, or was it a popular story for all audiences, men and women, or only the boys? Most likely only the boys would be my guess. But my sense is, again, from internal context, which is all I have to answer that question from, would be that it would definitely be a story amongst the men, since even within the book itself, that is typically like it would be said to the room full of people, which would include women, but it was usually the men who were asking for the stories and sharing it. But you do have a couple of occasions where, like, you have the wife of someone, or like the queen, who is pretty much the one ruling her town at one point in the book. She's the one who asks Odysseus for a story. So I think it depends on who's telling it.
This morning I was looking up because there's, I guess, question in some circles about like who Homer was. And is Homer one person writing these stories? And I came across there's a theory that someone has that Homer was a woman. And I thought that was interesting because it is a very masculine story, but there are sometimes some female characters like that queen who like Athena tells him like she's actually the one you need to impress. That I just thought that was interesting to have
Yeah.
like a feminine lens to looking at the story.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
will say I
I
don't
don't
know
think
if it
Homer was
was.
a woman, but
Yeah. Yeah. I will say that given everything that I've heard about like Emily Wilson's translation and how like different hers was, I was expecting this to be an even more masculine book than it was. So I don't know if that just happens to be because of the translation that I had, but I was surprised at the prevalence of like Athena in a very positive and powerful role, which makes sense because she is the goddess of war and all things awesomeness. But like you said, there was a queen in one of the towns who was like, she's the one who's really ruling everything. And everybody knew that and was okay with that. Um, Kurt was saying that the Odyssey is 15 hours and 30 minutes long, and that would be one long day. It sure would.
yeah.
But without television and radio and maybe anything to do, who knows? Um, Doug heard the Odyssey was designed to be performed over a 3-day period. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
That's like an evening of television watching.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of television watching. Britta, as far as you understand it, it was for all audiences, like Shakespeare was in his time. It was not performed as one piece, but bit by bit, like what people wanted to hear. Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of like, in case you missed it, kind of for who's just joining.
For those of you who came late,
Yeah.
For those of you in the back, don't worry. I'm going to repeat that section 17 times. You'll get it by the end. Have we all memorized it yet? Yeah, there's a lot of repetition. Oh my gosh. Yeah, all of the above. I think so as well, Kurt, is that it would be all of those. You could watch a full Shakespearean play with the elite, or you could go to the Ren Fest and hear a 30-minute snippet catered to the masses. Yep. Yeah, I'm sure there's everything in between because you see everything in between in the book as well, where there's times where I'm going to sit down and tell the whole journey. I'm going to slightly abbreviate it. I'm going to give you the highlight reel. Yeah. And Kurt was saying storytelling was a profession like town crier, and you imagine that each city had their own plus traveling storytellers. Yeah. So to get to back up a little bit, we usually talk about our history with the book and our expectations. So this was my high school reread. I was actually required to read this in middle school, not the whole thing by any means, but we started learning about the Odyssey and his journey and reading snippets about it in middle school. And then at high school, I remember reread the entire Odyssey. And from that experience, I remember liking it better than the Iliad. I don't think we were ever required to read all of the Iliad. I don't think I took whatever class that was. But we did read longer excerpts from the Iliad as well. And I think that was why I didn't take whatever that other class was, because I was like, oh no, I already didn't like what I read. I don't want to read more. And for me, I was sort of expecting or looking for a lot of action and adventure. I was looking for, I wanted to see if I could find the signs of the like oral tradition, like repetition or certain names or words or hooks being in the book, like things that kept coming around and being said the same way as a way of stirring the memory to like, oh yeah, this is where the story goes next, or this is, this is a natural breaking point or a natural starting point. I was expecting it to be a difficult read. I don't know why. I just was expecting it to be challenging. And I was expecting there to actually be very few females in the book at all, let alone having any of their point of views or that kind of thing. And then the other thing that I was expecting was that 99.9% of this book was going to be about Odysseus on his ship trying to get home and stopping and interacting with various monsters and gods and that kind of thing. So, what about you?
That last bit, that was also my expectation going in. I don't remember if I had to read this in high school or not. I know in middle school, I grabbed this before we went live. This is a book, Gods, Men, and Monsters from the Greek Myths. It's a whole series. There's a bunch of different collections of, mythology traditions. I used to get this out from the library over and over and over again, where they were sending me home notices like, this needs to be returned now. So finally I bought a copy off of thrift books. And in the very end of it is a story about the Trojan War and then Odysseus after the war. And so I'm realizing now that that's where I got the idea that the Odyssey would just be Odysseus' story, like his adventure. And so I'm thinking I must not have then gone back and read it in high school. Because I was so surprised that we're following. So this is the story. So it's just told as like a typical story for kids. It's got illustrations. And it's only Odysseus, and it's going like, after the war, he ended up here, and then he went here, and then there was this monster, and then there was this witch. And then meanwhile, back at home, can you believe this was going on? But he got there, and
Yeah, I think I got that impression because in middle school, I probably also read like a condensed version that was something like that, or who knows, maybe that exact one. And then also I remember like, what was it, the 60s, 70s film? And all I remember of the movie is all of that. He went here, he went there, monster, 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 kind of thing. So, yeah. And what about your expectations?
So I went in expecting it to be that like adventure story. And I expected to enjoy that because I loved Greek mythology so much, like in middle school, and it's been a while since I read it. I expected to get back into that. And like have the gods, messing with the mere mortals. And so we definitely did get that. But I was also expecting, because now I'm actually reading like the Odyssey, not like the kids' version of the Odyssey, I expected it to be over my head. And so it wasn't. And now I wish I had gave myself a little bit more credit in being able to read the verse version.
Yeah. But that's good to know. Like, I think that's helpful to hear because I think there's a lot of people, and I remember going back and forth about that decision myself, because somehow the idea of reading poetry did seem like it would be harder than reading prose, because I don't tend to read a lot of poetry. But then I remember at one point you, like, when we were trying to like sync up page numbers or book numbers or whatever, you showed me a picture of your page and I was like, oh no, that seems way more intimidating, because it was like a block of text.
Yeah. And I guess I'll also admit to doing some skimming throughout this, because it was a block of text and there was so much repetition.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that. So Doug was asking, was mentioning the Iliad and the love song of Achilles, and just that was a good book and really kind of focuses on the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. I have read that. I also thought it was really well done, and it fleshed out a part of Achilles that like I had never really paid attention to, and that relationship between him and Patroclus comes up a lot in the Odyssey, which I didn't remember, but almost every single time Achilles is mentioned, like they are mentioned together. And so I thought that was interesting. And Britta also really liked that book.
Yeah, I
Um,
liked that one.
yeah, I've read both that one and Circe. Um, I liked Circe better, but I did really like both of them.
I think I like the Song of
Um,
Achilles just slightly more than Circe.
yeah, I think it can go either way. Like I definitely see like they are slightly different. So I
Song of
get why
Achilles
like
made me ugly cry at like 2 a.m. and Circe didn't. So like that's the only like one notch higher that Song of Achilles gets.
see, I know where people would do that at the end, but I think I was so aware of like there's only one way this could end
Yeah.
that like I don't know. Maybe I like self-protected myself. I don't know. Kurt DNF to the Song of Achilles, but loved Circe. Yeah, see, it goes
You
back
didn't
and
get to the
forth.
crying part then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you definitely should read both of those books, especially if you've read the Odyssey, or even if you haven't, or if you've read the Iliad. I think they're both really good books that go along. But we will get to other books to read. So let's talk about this book some more in terms of like our actual book review of it. We usually talk about our favorite and least favorite parts. So what were some of your favorite parts of the book?
So my
Or
favorite
did you have
part,
it?
yeah, there were a couple like moments and like scenes that I really liked. Especially when we finally get to Odysseus returning to Ithaca. Which my gosh, just takes forever.
I was going to say that was
And
my
then
least favorite part of the book. Like,
even when he finally makes it home, it takes forever for him to just be like, honey, I'm home.
I know. I'm like, gosh darn it, just say hi. Just
But in those moments of him back, his homecoming and that feeling of like him looking around and seeing what's different but what's the same, I liked all that part. He sees a dog that he left behind. That was quite a nice
Argos.
sad moment. But I think my favorite thing is now the messaging as he's home, and his home is filled with suitors taking advantage of him being away, and they want to marry his wife. They're eating away his son's inheritance,
Literally.
making themselves comfortable. And he comes back home in disguise. They don't know he's the rightful owner of this estate, and they treat him like crap. And there's a lot of messaging there of like, be kind to this beggar. First, he could be a god. You never know. The gods like to trick people and be in disguise, but the underlying message is for compassion and hospitality. And I really liked those moments as they came up.
Yeah, welcoming the stranger. I loved that theme, like that whole theme that's surrounded by like the idea of guest and friendship was so strong throughout the book, and you very much got a sense was like a really important part of culture at some point. Because early on in the book, it comes up at one point because Telemachus arrives at another like kingdom, basically. And the sons go into their father, the princes go into their father, and they're like, there's a stranger at the door. He'd like to see you. Should we let him in? And the father is like instantly livid. He's like, absolutely. I can't even believe you're coming to me with this question.
Yeah.
Like, I went to Troy and I only came home because of the hospitality of the people who welcomed me as a stranger. Like, how could I not welcome someone else? And
right. It's like, not only invite him in, let's give him some horses.
yeah, he gave him the king's portion. He's like, here's this, everything you want, whatever, but you are welcome here. And I was just mind blown by like that whole like welcoming of stranger, which I think is a huge lesson
Right.
that for today.
So there's like that hospitality element, but then there's also this compassion and understanding. Like Odysseus has created this whole backstory for himself in disguise, which admittedly are some of the parts I skipped because I'm like, none of this is true. And he's going on and on and on. Like, this is a full family history that never actually happened.
Right.
And
Here's my 3-page backstory. Like, have you ever seen Phineas and Ferb?
Yes.
He like, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, he had a total Doofenshmirtz backstory moment where it was like, oh, we don't need to hear this, honey, because it does not tie in. And you knew as you were reading it that it was not going to tie in.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I get it. You're not revealing to the goat herd that like you're you. Like, okay, you're not revealing to your wife yet that you're you, but like, do you have to go over like your imaginary father's backstory twice?
Right. It wasn't just once. And like, I was like, was there no like literary idea of abbreviating something?
Yeah.
And it really seems like there wasn't, because there was no abbreviation. If somebody was like, tell us how you got away from Circe, we would get the entire story again. Mm-hmm. And like, those were the moments where we were talking about where it was like, oh, in case some of you came late, here's that backstory a third time.
But within that imaginary, like, you know, character moment that Odysseus is having, he's establishing that, like, be kind to me even though I'm a beggar, because you don't know, like, I was once even of a higher station than you are. Right. And like, things happened. I was unlucky. I made bad choices, which is all true.
Right.
Just not in the way he's relaying it.
Yeah.
Like, it does mirror what he actually did go through. Yeah. But like, the underlying message is like, you don't know what happened to someone to make them appear to you as they are now. And so I liked that compassionate message as well.
Yeah, the message in there is good. The way of getting to it was
tedious.
A little bit. Yeah. It was a little rough to have to go through, unless you came late, in which case, like, okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Kurt was also saying that his favorite part was the coming home with the dog, which is so funny because it's such a short and literally passing moment in the book. But it is, or in the story, but it is so well told. And if you are a dog lover or an animal lover, like Homer just rips your heart out and eats it in that moment. He's like, it's just, and we won't get into spoilers of what the moment with Argos was, but you'll know it when you get to it. Doug also loved Argos. One of your wiener dogs is 19 years old. Is his name Argos? I would totally name a dog Argos after that.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah.
Rita loved the scenes with Penelope even before he came home, but Odysseus irked you a lot of times. So self-involved. Interesting. Yeah. Hang around Odysseus long enough and you trust nobody. Yeah. Like, okay, now that I'm home, let me spend the next 50 pages testing my wife, even though every human being on the planet that I know of has been like, your wife is hanging in there. She's doing you a solid. Trust your wife. And he's like, nope, let's test her and her entire retinue. Kurt, don't think you're necessarily supposed to like Odysseus, but to admire only some of his qualities. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think also, in addition to that, I think it's pop culture that has made him more of a hero than I think maybe the book itself has. Back then, heroes were not superheroes. Yep, they had their faults. Even Achilles had his ankle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, is I think popular culture has taken Odysseus and made him into a modern day idea of superhero and, you know, perfect and that kind of thing, and brave and awesome and da-da-da. And you don't see all of that all the time. Like, you see like Athena propping him up and being like, dude, let me help you out because you're gonna suck this up if I
Yeah.
let
Now
you
go
do
here. Now say this.
that. Right.
Especially with
Yeah,
Telemachus, but also with Odysseus.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. To Doug, it seems that the mindset of modernish readers is a lot different from 8th century BCE class, sex, and control of gods. Yeah. And the dog part is something someone could easily have skipped, but it makes it so human. Yes, absolutely. Not just a series of scenes. Yeah.
Mhm.
There are very small moments and scenes that I think Homer does like superbly. Did you have any other favorites before I share mine?
I have one more, but I have a feeling maybe it'll come up with yours, so you can go ahead.
Okay. And you guys can also share your favorites, more favorites if you have them while you're talking. So I had a couple of things that I definitely wanted to remember. I mentioned already that I did really like this translation. I liked some of the word choice. You and I talked about word choice in particular towards the end of the book. There is a household servant who becomes much more prevalent in the story towards the end. He is what was it, a goat herder for the
Mhm.
family. And what was he called in your edition?
In mine, whenever Telemachus would address him, he called him daddy.
So he'd be like, "Hey, daddy,
Yeah.
like, tell me about this. What do you think I should do next?" And this was not Odysseus. This was the goat herd who was part of the family.
Right.
Um,
Which I liked the sentiment of, this is the goat herd that's been here. Telemachus has grown up without his father, but it was just awkward to read. And then there's even a scene where he's reprimanding the goat herd and he calls him daddy.
Daddy, don't do that.
Yeah, he's like, daddy, if you don't bring him the bow, like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I liked the word choice in a lot of places in my book. Um, he refers to that old man as uncle, which I think did a much better job of getting across like that familiar respect, the respect for the elder, but also the closeness of family. There was interesting moments in the translation where when somebody was like making a speech, then this would go into what was probably iambic pentameter. I forgot to read about that, but it definitely went into a more metered verse during those points and actually rhyming metered verse. But for the rest of it, it was not in rhyming verse or metered, but it was very easy to read and very fluid and very quick to read. And there were a couple of moments of translation that I thought really hit home. One of my favorites was the opening of book 2, which I also have to say I absolutely loved the book titles that this translation gives. So in here, a book 2 is called A Hero's Son Awakens. And I thought the book titles and the way they were translated really helped me understand what I should be focusing on and getting out of each book. And I loved the opening of book 2 in this translation. It's basically the moment where Telemachus like gets a pair of cojones and and he opens it in such a way after having closed book 1, and the words that are used to translate it made me go, yeah, all right, we got the real Telemachus standing up. So I attribute that not just to Homer but also translation. I really enjoyed the variety of stories that got in here and not just like what turned out to be like the 6 pages I thought it was. um, the I think my favorite character actually ended up being Telemachus to some extent. Um, Not because he was my favorite person, but I just really liked his character arc and following him. And I feel like I grew more attached to him than Odysseus. Um, I loved every time Zeus came into the stupid story because I wish I had counted it, but the number of times where there's just the line Zeus sighed. And it's not like it's like a Oh gosh, here we go again. Like with all of you gods, what do you guys want this time? How am I gonna have to super god save you? Like,
This
make
was
up
a
your
very like friendly version of Zeus, I feel like
mind.
because this wasn't his, like
His
he
story.
didn't really have much care about what was going on. He just had to like make sure the gods themselves weren't getting into it over what was unfolding.
Yeah,
He just really had to focus on appeasing. But I feel like there are stories where Zeus himself is a monster,
yeah,
and he
yeah,
was definitely laid back in this
yeah.
story.
In this one, Zeus is just on his throne, being like king of the universe, and or at least the planet and the earth, and being like,
He's just vibing
okay,
in this
if
one.
you guys want to do like this, do your thing, you know. So but he's constantly just sighing at them in my translation, like, here we go again, guys.
Mhm.
Um, I loved the recounting of Odysseus's sea adventure. Though what I thought was going to be 90% of the book ended up being a handful of pages. It wasn't even one whole book in the story. It was actually one of the shorter parts of the story. And I was like, that was it. Everything that I remember about this book was like 6 pages long. Okay. And then what else? Oh, we talked about and like Kurt called it like the moments that become more than just a passing scene or just a moment in the book. And I ended up calling them homey descriptions because there's these little small moments that I feel like a less successful writer might have made like throwaway moments where, like, you know, Odysseus just walks through the woods and he arrives, you know, at the cabin, or he walks back into town and, like, you know, he arrives or whatever. But you get those little moments like with Argos. You get little moments where somebody sits down to talk with somebody else, but it's not just they went and sat down to talk. Like, they went and sat down and they pulled up some cushions, you know, he brought over the bowl, and you get through those moments like a lot of like humanizing moments, a lot of emotional moments, and a lot of culture
Mhm.
brought into the story. And I really enjoyed that as well. Um, and there were a couple of moments in the translation where the word choice paid off to actually um, bring the humor in some of the people's speeches across. And I can't imagine how difficult that is to do. But there was one line in particular that actually made me laugh out loud. So I appreciated that. So I think that's it for me. Did I mention the thing that?
Um, the moment when Odysseus and his crew visit Hades, or they have to go to the underworld and talk to like the ghost of the seer and figure out how to get home safely and then not at all follow his advice. Um, in that moment, like he sees a bunch of other people, like after he's like, okay, main mission done. Now let me talk to some more ghosts. And some of those moments, some of them got a little long and drawn out, but there was a few extra, like,
There were a few that were like, I got emotional
yeah.
over. And I can think of one in particular that I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there are some moments that he really gets well done. And then there's some moments that are just like kind of funny. Like, I'm thinking of like when they're about to leave Circe and the island, and the guy falls off the roof and like
Yeah.
nobody realizes it, and that becomes like a whole issue that when you first read it, you're kind of like, why are you telling me this guy fell off the roof? This is like such a random event to throw in, but it
Yeah, because it's like
brings it
how
back.
that book ends, I think, is like,
Yeah,
and this one was taking a nap, and in all the excitement, he fell and broke his neck.
right. He missed a rung on the ladder and fell and broke his neck and died. And you're like, who's this person? Why
Yeah.
do we care? But he makes you care about it later. Yeah, so let's go to see the comments real quick, and then we'll
Mhm.
go into what we didn't like. Britta was saying that Emily Wilson, or her translation opening of the poem, calls him a complicated man. That was Odysseus. And I think that's accurate. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Kurt agrees. Good way to describe him. Hebrews 13:2 from Doug, entertaining angels unaware. The Zina idea has a lot of staying power. Yes. And it's interesting that you mentioned that with the Bible verse, because I think it is helpful to remember that this story kind of predates some of those ideas. Certainly the book of Hebrews. Kurt was saying that that was a translation
I think
issue.
that was
Yes.
when we get to Telemachus calling Eumaeus daddy.
Yeah, that was,
Definitely
yeah.
my translation only, because you had gotten several and we compared them to several other translations.
Yeah.
And mine was
Yeah.
definitely the most awkward.
Yes. Yes. Daddy was definitely the most awkward. My favorite was uncle, because there was also old man
I think
and
that's
grandpa.
Emily Wilson calls him old man.
I think
No, or
so.
she calls him grandpa. I think she uses
What are
grandpa.
Yeah, which I feel like both in some cultures, like it's words that have been used derogatorily towards older men. So for me, I'm like, that's not the intent, but it's hard to unhear that.
But it
Um,
fits better than daddy, because
I,
like, and sometimes Telemachus is using the word affectionately, but then like when he's
yes,
scolding him in the hall with the
yeah,
suitors about, doing the competition, then you could see where he's like, oh man, just do as you're
yeah,
told. Or,
yeah.
come on, grandpa, like move on it,
Which
bring
is
him the
actually
ball.
another translation issue, because in my translation, he's not scolding him in that moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was just mine. It seems like because the suitors start yelling at Eumaeus is
So yeah.
and he kind of freezes and like drops the bow or something, and
Right.
Telemachus like has this moment of like, you do it or I'm kicking you out. Like,
Right. Yeah, and I don't think I have that moment. I don't think I have that moment marked anymore. But I remember looking at that, and I have forgot to mention that mine, like, he doesn't threaten him. Like, he says something else, but it's more like, wait, hold up, stop what
yeah.
you're doing.
Okay.
So yeah. So that's interesting too. And I didn't look to see in the other ones. Um, so yeah, more ideas, people agreeing that Odysseus is complicated and it's a good word, but are also really appreciated that the slaves were called slaves in the Wilson translation and not servants and maids. And I found that varied from translation to translations. She's not the only one who does that. Um, I don't remember who, but there were a couple of other translations I noticed, typically more recent ones, that also will refer to them as slaves and slavery in the situation that they're in, or they'll use other words that have to do with the idea that like they're not free people. um, Odysseus kills most of the poor girls for getting essayed by the suitors. Hard to like this guy. And I think that's also another translation issue, is because I think some of the translations make it seem like the girls were getting essayed, and some of them seem to be implying that the girls were going along with the suitors and were like joining the suitors. And there's certainly, at least in my translation, at least one of the slave girls who was like, everyone knew she was siding with the suitors and had taken up with one of the suitors.
Yeah, I feel like mine has a little bit of both. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of like, these women did this, but then there was also like Odysseus talking to the suitors and saying like, you've done wrong against these women. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he does ask
Either way, it was brutal. Like
yeah,
the end.
yeah, the end, yeah. Because he does do a check and semi ends up trusting Penelope's like main woman um to help him figure out and make sure that he's not missing anyone. But it does seem to be at the end of the day, yeah, just all of them.
Which also Athena has already decided everyone's dying. Like,
Right,
so
right.
like some of it's on Odysseus, but a lot of it is Athena's made this
Yeah,
choice already.
yeah. Yeah, because there's even like some pushback on that, and Zeus is one of the ones who points out, like, Athena, this is what you wanted.
Yeah.
Like, Kurt was saying the latter scene, he thinks the storyteller had to go to the bathroom. I had to cut it short. Like, and then this guy died. Okay, we'll get back to that in just a second after this break. There is no consent possible if you're a slave. That is a really good point. Um, but I think also you would have to read the translation. This is not the maid with the other men. Like it's implying very much so that because she's the one sharing it. She's like, I'm in a relationship with this guy and I like this other people and they know it. I don't know that I would say that was true for the other women. And you could still talk about Stockholm syndrome in that, right? Like she's an enslaved person. And is she now feeling affectionate towards these suitors because she sees a way of escape through them? So I think that could also bring up issues of that in there. But I think for the time period piece and in the context it's supposed to be implied that some of them were betraying Odysseus's household because they were willing to be, I don't think servants. I think maybe these women believed that they would have been freed if they went with the suitors. And I'd have to read the like portions of my translation, but it may also be that Emily Wilson has translated that differently because she saw something else in the text.
And I think that's probably a good case where Emily Wilson probably understanding more like socially what was going on and not as concerned with making this a pretty translation where yeah, mine I feel like throughout. So if you want to consider this, you know, what my least favorite thing was is that it's not critical enough of Odysseus the whole time. Like he is the champion in the story. We're not questioning his decisions. We're not questioning his motivations. And part of like the way the women, the female servants are described, it's very like almost forgiving of the situation. Like they were bad. They were, you know, misbehaving women. And so, you know,
they deserved what they got.
Like whether they were being assaulted or not, the translator is putting that tone out there differently. Yeah. I think translation to translation.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be one of those where, depending on your translation, for sure, it's definitely going to color what you think was actually going on with those women. Because I don't think it's clear from one translation to the other, because some of the translations I looked at definitely, like you said, seemed to be making Odysseus more of a hero than he was in the translation that I read, and definitely seemed to be coloring the rest of Penelope's household and the women around her differently than it was in mine, because mine did leave room in that to question Odysseus's actions towards these women. Like he was definitely questioned by multiple people, like, is what you're doing with these women right or fair? Are we happy about this? Are we comfortable with this? But I don't know that that was something that came up in every situation. And Doug was agreeing with Britta that never mind the sleeping with your boss. Yeah. Kurt's heard criticism of Wilson's translations is that she reinterprets it to what modern day women wish it to be, rather than the way it would have been at that time in their culture. Yeah, and I think all the translators are at risk of doing that. Kurt's understanding is that these were masculine epics and not feminine colored as Wilson does. It may appeal more to modern women, but perhaps not accurate to the time period. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say. I feel like that's something where
maybe it's not a matter of it being accurate to the time period, but being considered by the time period.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a complicated issue, because with translation, you usually have to look at multiple translations as well as be able to read the original yourself to finally be able to tell exactly how much a translator is coloring it to their own interpretation. But I do think that, like, because I've looked at some of those passages across multiple, and it is clear that there's like indecision about what is being said about these women and where they are. I think there seems to be a pretty decent consensus that some of them were like not in like some of them in my translation, some of them were definitely being essayed and like that's it. And then there was also a smaller portion of them that weren't, but were actually in relationships with these guys. Like, now how those relationships started, I don't know. What was involved in those relationships, and would they be considered healthy relationships today? Probably not. But
well, and it was one of the maids who tips off the suitors that Penelope has been tricking them at night and like undoing her weaving, which she told them, I'll pick one of you when I'm done with this cloth. But then she would undo all her progress. And like, so there is this idea that there were maids who were, you know, placing their bets on the other side.
And I think some of what we have to take into consideration as well in the storytelling of that is what was Homer's intent in telling that story. And it does seem like his intent with these women was to make clear that some of Penelope's own women were betraying her. Not all of them, but like with Odysseus's household, some of his household betrayed him, and some of her, like her retinue, was also betraying her. But it wasn't all of them. And it seems like the idea that Homer wanted to set up was that they only had a few people who remained loyal to them. And then the questions of like, why were these women betraying him? Like, was it just because they wanted freedom and they saw that within these other men and that kind of thing? I don't think is a question that Homer's trying to answer. I think he's trying to set up a household dynamic. And then we could read more into it, ideas about their own culture. Like, what does it say about the culture of men at the time that men would write where a whole household of women would happily be in relationship with either their captors or their suitors or this or that? But I don't think that was a question that Homer himself was trying to answer. So I think you have to look at those as two separate parts of literary criticism, but I think they're both valid parts for sure. Doug was saying when we talked about The Great Gatsby, you said it was too bougie for you, basically. And the Odyssey takes that to the next level. Interesting. You'll have to tell us why you feel that way. And while you type that out, we can talk about anything else that we didn't like. I had a much shorter list for this.
Yeah. So because Britta mentioned that she appreciated Wilson using the term slave instead of servants, when we meet Eumaeus, who is like the loyal servant, he's the goat herd. Yes, goat. Or is he the swineherd?
Oh. What animal did he take care of?
You know what? He might have been the swine, because there's a
good I said goat, and there's but a bad you're right. Yeah, because I think the goat guy comes along later, doesn't he?
And he's the nasty one. Oh, I'm so sorry, Eumaeus. Eumaeus might have been the swineherd.
Let me go back. Okay, we'll keep going. I'll find out the answer.
We get his story when he's being reintroduced or introduced to this man who he does not know is Odysseus, and they're sharing their stories. And the whole time I'm reading it, I'm getting uncomfortable because we get this like tragic backstory of Eumaeus being sold and bought by Odysseus's father Laertes, but then being like incredibly like grateful to the family for having bought him. And it's just this weird like dynamic between like you are a slave, but we're gonna talk kindly of the slave owner. And then elsewhere, or even before that, now Penelope's maid, which I forget her name, and I think this was a translation issue. uh whenever she spoke, all of her dialogue was written in like this really like different way to how everyone else was speaking. And I was like, wow, okay, like really drive home that like she is a low class. Like she had very broken like all her words kind of broke off, and like I had to like read it out loud to hear her dialect and make sense of the words. So again, my least favorite parts come down to translator choice.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had asked me about that. And you're like, is her like I forget what like
You're clear.
basically
That was what it was.
yes, yes. And you had asked me like, does she speak a different dialect than everybody else? And I looked at all the translations that I had, and she did not in any of them.
Yeah.
And so it definitely seemed to be sort of a sort of classist decision
And at some
by your
point I was like, all right,
translator.
I'm going to try to read this out loud to you. I apologize. Like, this is going to sound awful. And you go, they sound Scottish. And so we had to look it up. This is an English translator. Like, we're like, yeah, he's very much using like dialect to show class. And then you brought up, because especially in Eumaeus's story, we get that like he was high class though, but like he was kidnapped and then sold.
Right. 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 And we do get a little bit of her backstory, which also indicates that she came from a better background. But it's like when they become enslaved, they become like the slaves of these other people in servile roles. And yeah, so that was a choice by the translator for sure. And it was a swineherd.
Yes,
he was a swineherd. I said the goat thing. So, for me, I think I had two things that were my least favorite. One was the repetition. I mentioned plays and stage directions, and there were some repetitions that happened throughout the book. Like Odysseus is frequently referred within. There's 24 books within this story. And within one book, Odysseus would often have some sort of, tag or title to his name, like, oh, Odysseus the Wayfarer, or Odysseus the Tactician, or whatever. And that was repeated. Those didn't bother me, but and some actually grew on me, like the sun rose with the same exact wording in every single scene. And initially that irritated the crap out of me. And then after a while, I loved it because I actually loved the description of it. But then there were other times where it was like, I'm going to repeat to you the story of how this thing happened in full length that like made me want to skim. Like it became boring and too much and became those stage directions that aren't interesting to read, like exit stage left. Like okay. Like I know why they're in there. I know why the repetition's in there. It doesn't mean that I like it. So I had those moments. And then I also had let's see. Oh, you had mentioned this way back at the beginning, that the actual part where Odysseus is finally back at Ithaca was way too drawn out for me. Like I get why he didn't get back to Ithaca and like dive right in and off with their heads. Like I was fine with that. But you feel like you have this build up to him getting back to Ithaca and things are gonna happen. And he gets back to Ithaca and it's like, well, let's do this little thing and then let's set up that thing. And I get why these things are happening. Like we're getting to see Odysseus be the tactician with the help of Athena and how they're all going to work this out. But it was just too long and too slow for my personal liking. I felt like it messed with the pace and it took the book from what was probably going to be a 5-star for me and I want every translation of this that I like down lower.
Yeah, that part I started almost like getting anxious or like getting like really antsy. And I'm like, come on, like I still have 2 books left in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt like, if you like show your dog their like leash and harness and they start getting like, okay, it's happening, but then like you get a phone call, poor dog. Like that's how he felt once he's back in Ithaca.
Yeah. That's a part of the book that I feel like would work better broken up. And like the true way this story would have been told, where it's like, oh, tell me that part about what happens when, Penelope is tested, or tell me about that part where, Odysseus and his son meet. Like those as like separate little stories, as separate books, and told like in one sitting on its own, I think I would enjoy that. But like when you try to read it through, no. It did not work for me. So let's go back to the comments real quick, and then we can go on to the high school appropriateness. Let's see here. Oh, I just removed the star and now I'm lost. Oh, okay. Doug was saying the maids didn't know if Odysseus was ever coming home or not, and he told Penelope to remarry when Telemachus grows up. Slaves, goat, and swine herds, any working dude looked down on, and never mind how women get treated. Odysseus was the kind of guy you should avoid at all cost. Yeah.
I think another thing that's like based on when I read just like a shortened version of this in middle school to like reading it now is I didn't have a concept of how grand of an estate Odysseus had that these suitors were trying to stake claim to. And I think in whatever version, like that's basically a quick for kids, here's the general story. Just I pictured just like a couple of guys in their house, like a very crowded, regular size house, not that he had this, farms and all these animals. And so yeah, Odysseus himself was not as it was much bigger than I remembered. Yeah, it didn't memory.
Well, and I think it's kind of fair because even in the book itself, while more aspects of his estate are mentioned, I feel like you really only get perspective of the suitors and just how many of them there are, like towards the end. Because then there's finally like one point where he was like, no, you don't understand. It's about this many guys and this many things and their retinue and this and that. And you finally start to get like scaled up exactly how many suitors there are, which then when you go back and start thinking about the fact that that number of people are feasting every day and have been for this number of years, then you're like, dang.
Yeah. And
Disney's got some money.
Speaking of Gatsby, like there was a point where like I was like, it reminds me of Gatsby's parties where people are just showing up because that's where everybody is. I'm like, how many of them are actually suitors? Or like, this is just where everyone was and like, there's a free meal. Like,
yeah.
It was a funny scene.
And Kurt was saying that your comment on the speech of the slaves and the translations reminds you of Percival Everett's and James. Yeah, except in her translation, it wasn't code switching. Like it was a poor authorial choice, not it was making a class distinction that doesn't actually exist in the text or in the book, or like it just made a distinction in this character that didn't belong. And it seemed like it was because the author wanted her, or the translator rather, wanted her to feel like to other her. It othered her in a way that Homer did not other this character. Doug was saying the repetition made you think of the King James version of the Bible and Alice's Restaurant. I'm not familiar with Alice's Restaurant. But yeah, a lot of older stories have, where you can get anything you want. That reminds me of like Henry Ford. You can get anything you want so long as you can get any color you want so long as it's black. And that song is only 18 minutes long. Imagine 15 hours. So true, but noted how easy it is to remember all the words, even though it's 18 minutes, right? Because of the repetition. Yep. Emily Wilson's translation is shorter than most English versions. She intentionally had the had exactly the same amount of syllables as the original. Oh, that is an interesting little tidbit. So a lot of people are being perhaps more wordy. Odysseus was very rich and powerful. Yep, Kurt, absolutely. And yeah, it's definitely a translation problem. I mean, translating is hard. I don't envy translators who are trying to make things work, but some choices just don't work. You can convey the word to word translation, but still not convey the intent or keep the meter. Yeah. That's why Kurt, or rather Doug, wonders about the original intended audience. Was it a rock and roll audience or chamber music audience? Yeah, yeah. All right. So to keep things moving, because we're going kind of long here, high school appropriateness. So in this section, we get it back to the idea of the high school question and why it was taught, or why do we think it might be taught in high school? This is just our opinion. And how appropriate we think it is for the high school level. So not necessarily in terms of content warning per se, but more just like, does this make sense to teach to high school students? And is it at the right age level for high school students, that kind of thing? So what do you think, Alex?
Oh, hold on. I've got dogs on their way outside making noise.
Oh, okay. Shall I go first? Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, I think they're out. Sorry. I think it's taught just in like the history of storytelling. This, along with Beowulf and Gilgamesh. Like, I don't remember like I said, I don't remember if this was assigned, but I remember it at least being discussed or like a portion of it being told. The same with Gilgamesh and Beowulf, just because like you get that like history of storytelling and the style of storytelling, introducing this idea of an oral tradition, and then a verse poetic structure being like the oldest stories. And so I think that just makes sense to like introduce to students under that like topic or umbrella of like, this is what storytelling was. These are the oldest stories ever told. And it is an adventure story. Like, so it's, here's an example of some really fun writing. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know, like what else about it was like a reason to include it in the curriculum, except that.
And then what about like the appropriateness? Do you feel like it's an appropriate book for high school level, that it's like rightly aged?
I think so. And that it would, again, depend on the translation. If you get something that's a little bit too floral and stuffy and in the, focused on making it sound very poetic, I think you're going to lose people. But if you have a translation that really focuses on the adventure element of the story, and then it, again, opens up this like discussion on culture. So I do see it as being like something that high school students can engage with and, walk away thinking about messages.
Yeah. Yeah, I think largely the same thing. I thought it was really interesting, the point too that you were making about it, being a way of discussing like the storytelling tradition and bringing it in that sense. Because I was also thinking about the fact that it's a major part of the Western canon, particularly in terms of if you're going to teach about literary allusions, like this book is alluded to in so many other works, and there has inspired so many other works of fiction that touch on it very closely or very loosely, or are in some way retellings of it, or literally just address some aspect of this story. It is a major literary form that is usually discussed, particularly in the Western canon, which is epic poetry. And this is usually the example that is given. I think it's also taught because it is so much in the popular imagination, whether people recognize that or not. There have been films, TV shows, operas, music that have all been made specifically about this book, as well as, again, tangentially related to the book, whether it's using the story of that return journey home or that kind of thing. So I think it's a way of introducing students to sort of like what feels like a root story so that they can start to understand what's happening in these other stories. Um, and then I think, Greek mythology tends to be a huge focus of study, especially when you're studying like ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And I think it's a really easy way to introduce like not just who the gods are, but like how the ancient Greeks felt like they played out in life. Mm-hmm. And then I agree. I also think I think like reading wise, a good translation can really help in terms of making it appropriate at a high school level. And I think there are elements of it that are really relatable for high school students in terms of, like you said, life lessons to learn, issues of hospitalities. I think even just learning about like approaching difficulties in life and how, at least initially, things can be approached without violence, maybe not in the long run. And then also, I think with Telemachus, you get a really good like coming of age story. Not as much of one as I would have wanted, but you definitely have that, what does it mean to become of age? What does it mean to grow up and really become the person you're meant to be, or who Athena is making you be? And yeah,
Telemachus definitely has a like, okay, it's time to like leave your room and go see the big world. Like that, I guess that whole like growth storyline would be like relatable to a high school level.
Yeah. That was probably like the one disappointing part of the story to me, is that Athena's like, I want him to go off and make a man of him. And like, I love a good like coming of age story, but it's like he goes off and like at one point in the book, it's acknowledged, well, he's just been hanging out at this guy's house this whole time.
Yeah.
And like, he has to come home, and she talks about how he's like going to go out and make a name for himself and come back. And to some extent he does, because he makes a name of himself because they know that he's actively out seeking his father.
Right.
But then he really has to come home.
It's more about how people are talking about him when he's not there.
Yeah.
Because then even when Odysseus comes back, and he's the first person to know who Odysseus is, and as Odysseus is reestablishing himself in the home, like he almost regresses back into like a childish state with like this, like, now my dad's here, mom, like respect dad.
Like, yeah. I definitely also thought there was like a little bit of regression of Telemachus, and then he's kind of like coming back for it and standing side by side. So it definitely wasn't the like coming of age arc that I'm used to, or even that I feel like the beginning of the book led you to expect. But it might have also just been me personally reading into Athena's language about that, what I like currently think of as like making a name for oneself, where that's all going to happen out in the world. Whereas for Telemachus, it happened partially out in the world and partially at home, which I think is fitting for this story. Mm-hmm. So for other people, Kurt was saying that Alice's Restaurant is a traditional Thanksgiving song. Of what tradition? I have never heard of it before. But you can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. Lots of repetition. Also an anti-war song. Interesting. Never knew that. Thank you for sharing. Britta, you don't know whether to include it in the curriculum because you would find it difficult as an English teacher to choose the right translation. That's fair. I mean, but you would probably know your students really well, and or depending on the school, it would be chosen for you.
Yeah, I think that call is made.
But I think if you somehow magically were at the School of Awesomeness and could make that choice for yourself, it would probably just be based on your students. Good point. Some teens think some piece of fiction is so original, but not knowing what was previously was written or told. Yeah. For Kurt, reminds you of some recent popular songs where kids this is new when in fact it's stolen from previous songs, right? And they could probably relate
every song these days.
right, right. And that would be a really good like point of like modern day connection and a way of helping them understand like why am I reading this? Like for the same reason you would want to listen to the original.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Doug, you're reading Ulysses because of this Homer, and you had forgotten how many modern phrases we get from Joyce. Nothing new under the sun. Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially when you're going back to like BCE. Yeah. like there's a lot of copycat going on after that.
Yeah. I also really like that point you made of like, because elements of the story are so included in so many other things, that it is nice to know where the originals came from. And I think about that a lot. Like I grew up with a religious, like I went to Sunday school, I knew Bible stories. And like, so there are times that I'm reading with my kids and I'm like, oh, do you see like how this is recycled? And they have no idea because I didn't raise them. I'm like, I'm going to have to make you guys read the Bible just so you get other literary references.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a commonly taught course in the English. Yeah, that's a commonly taught course in English majors is you can frequently take a class on the Bible that's just on the Bible as a work of literature because it's so major.
In college, one of my literature electives was the Bible as literature. And I was excited to study that, like the Bible's influence in literature. And all it was we read, and then at the end of the week, we'd have a quiz on like what happened. Like it was just reading the Bible. It wasn't actually studying it as literature, I felt. That was a disappointment.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, if you read a lot from the Western canon, it's to exclude the Bible like from that reading is gonna be like excluding Shakespeare, except Shakespeare's also quoting the Bible. So like you're removing a good chunk of allusions from your life.
Well, in that was it Thomas Foster, the How to Read Literature Like a Professor? Like I've read the kids version with my kids. One of the chapters is called like if it sounds familiar, like it's from the Bible. And then the next chapter is or Shakespeare.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And if the story feels familiar, it's probably the Odyssey.
Yeah.
I would add that to it. Britta was saying very good point about literary history, and you convinced her to include it. And Kurt, Ecclesiastes 1:9, nothing new under the sun. Yeah, we're not originals. Steinbeck's Casey and I used to be a preacher. Oh, yes. Casey used to be a preacher. Yeah.
I love Casey.
Yeah. All right. So that is more or less so the end of our discussion. At this point, we're just going to share what we ended up rating the book and some further reading and ideas and what our next book will be. So do you have yours written down?
I do.
I do too. So do you want to share 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. I think mine is more a matter of the translation.
That's fair. That's fair. So in case you're not actually looking at us, Alex gave a C. Was it just a straight C?
A C, which was, I rated it on Storygraph a 3 out of 5 stars.
And mine is a B+. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which technically on our scale is like just a B. Because I think I would have needed to do a 4.5 for it to truly be a B+. But I'm giving it a B+ anyway. And you guys can put in the comments what you would rate it if you read it. But I'm giving mine a B+ because I really liked my translation. And I think it was just the repetition that for me personally dragged it down. But if I rated it for like high school itself and its use in high school, I would give it a 5 out of 5.
Okay.
I totally think it should be taught in high school.
Yeah, I feel
So
like it makes sense to me that it's taught in high school. Yeah, I wouldn't come down like hard on one side or the other.
no, I would come down hard. I'd be
Yeah.
like, absolutely, yes, this is in our curriculum. Like, I would go to the mat for that. I may have been also watching way too much wrestling. So I would do a
Yeah,
takedown to
I
get
can
that
see
in.
this only going up with
Yeah,
a different translation.
I agree. I agree. Just from what you shared with me, I would
Mhm.
agree. You're very welcome, Britta. I'm glad you enjoyed. Kurt or Doug, rather. Sorry, Kurt and Doug. I don't know why I keep doing that. Probably because you guys keep commenting back to back. But Doug was saying two bourgeois, so 3 out of 5 tops. Okay, yeah. And Lattimore was a 5 out of 5 for Kurt. Um, Kurt personally liked the repetition. Well, yeah, then I can't see how you couldn't love it start to front. And Doug's got to check out the Lattimore mini thanks to Kurt, Britta, and company. Yeah. And then finally, if anybody has books to suggest to read or recommend after this one, I have a slew. I'll start with my books that this reminded me of. It reminded me of Don Quixote in terms of like the adventure time, like the way that there's like go on an adventure, encounter this thing, and have this like mini little story to tell. If you like that element of the Odyssey, there's way more of it in Don Quixote. Like that entire book, part one, is all of that. Um, it reminded me of Becky Chambers' a long way to a small angry planet and that whole series, which is called the Wayfinder series, or the Wayfarer series, which is what Odysseus is called, and they are on a spaceship trying to make a journey. So I don't think that's an accident. Also, Circe's Song of Achilles we mentioned, and I also made a connection to Dune. Um, Frank Herbert, because in Dune, the main character comes from the House of Atreides, which is basically Odysseus's line. Um, and the first book of Dune is a father and son story that very much there are elements of it that feel similar to Odysseus and Telemachus, and there's even a Penelope type figure in there. So those were connections I made. In terms of other translations, I would read. I do want to read Emily Wilson's translation at some point because of the repetition, not anytime soon. I also want to try maybe Robert Fagel's edition. His edition is the one that you'll find in Penguin Classics. And then, real quickly, for other books that I want to read, I think we talked about The Silence of the Girls. Is that one that we talked about? And then also A Thousand Ships, which has to do with the Trojan War. So I also do want to reread the Iliad at some point. I also, in theory, at some point want to try Ulysses, the postmodern version. And it really made me want to read more Greek myths. So I have the Robert Graves Penguin Deluxe edition of that. So those are my future one day maybe plans. What about you, Alex?
So very similar. I want to read Pat Barker also because we've finished her Regeneration series and like I really enjoyed the writing. And I was like, oh yeah, she has this whole, I think both of her books are based on the Trojan War. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to read the Iliad.
If you give a mouse a cookie.
And I have Ulysses upstairs, so I'm going to have to read Ulysses. But I definitely want to go back to reading just the really simple Greek myths. Like, and this is a kid's version. I'm sure I have somewhere else like a more, for adults kind of, but this is just light and easy. And you get this feeling of the characters, the gods as characters, Zeus is always chasing after women and doing whatever it takes. And Hades is the broody brother down in the underworld. So it was just always a good introduction, and it keeps it light and interesting. So yeah, if you liked that element of the Odyssey, just read some myths just for fun. The other thing I was thinking of is Madeline Miller's books. We talked about those, but also Margaret Atwood. I got my M's confused. Margaret Atwood has a book called The Penelopiad, which is Penelope's story. It also uses like a Greek chorus kind of like element, and I think it's all told like maybe from Hades, but like you get a chorus of her maids are speaking and like they're blaming her. But in that book especially, you get the sense that Odysseus is deceitful, that that the Odyssey favors him too much, and like he's really not to be trusted, and that's coming from Penelope. So that's really short, fun. It's got Margaret Atwood's tone, as you would expect to write a story about a woman. But I love that one, and now I want to reread that. And then I was thinking, like you brought up this just idea of a journey, like that story made me think of Homeward Bound or The Incredible Journey, as the book was called. The movie is Homeward Bound. And so I was like, oh, that's, a different sort of spin on this adventure story.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, like, I always think of Tolstoy, every story is either a stranger comes to town or, a man goes on a journey. And like, if that's not the Odyssey right there in two ideas.
And then I was reading this at the same time or like back to back with the Odyssey. And the main character in this is The Cider House Rules by John Irving. The main character is named Homer. And so then I started looking for connections to the Odyssey. And it is ultimately like a journey away from home and coming back. And then other characters maybe tempting him or keeping him in one place. So
like who's the Cyclops in that book?
But it's interesting to see recycled elements, even if it's not a one-for-one like Odyssey comparison.
Yeah, and I think those are illusions that you miss if you don't read the book. It's like you're not going to pick up, like, because now it's like the second you read the name Homer or Penelope or Telemachus, if somebody used that, like, wow, like that's definitely, or Odysseus or something that seems familiar to that, you've got to go, okay, wait, what is this author like wink, wink, nudging me about? Yeah. So, all right, well, we will finish up with your guys' final comments. Kurt was saying, think Odyssey times 1001 Arabian Nights. It's very over the top in its romanticism and the tears come in torrents. It has its own charm, but it won't be for everyone. Lots and lots of repetition. And what was this in reference to? Was it in reference to, I don't know. Are we missing a comment of yours, Kurt? Or maybe that just came in and I lost the connection. So let me know what that comment was connected to, Kurt. So maybe not for me with all the repetition. Yeah, maybe not. Dune, very good. No fantasy, though. A quote in 2 parts. He spent a month wading through Ulysses, which Sally told him was the greatest novel ever written. He threw it aside late one night. Oh, was that previous comment related to Ulysses? And said to her, baby, I just can't cut it. That book is as full of as a Christmas goose. Oh my gosh. And yes, Doug appreciated that comment. Okay. Oh, I did miss a comment. Yeah, it's not showing on my side. So I'm assuming it was the name of a book or something that you were referencing. So I'll check the comments offline and see if it just got held for some reason and look at it there. But yeah, so when the comments are back to back, they seem to miss the first ones. It'll actually hold it sometimes is what happens for who knows what reason. It should be thrown aside with great force. Yes, Dorothy Parker. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, that is it. Thank you guys for staying with us. I know this is way longer than our
It went a
discussions
little
usually
long,
are,
yeah.
but it was such a good discussion. And I mean, I think the Odyssey is worth it. We all went on a journey there and back again. It's the Fellowship of the Rings. I mean, you could consider the entire Fellowship of the Rings. It's kind of an Odyssey journey as well. So that might be another
so
way to consider.
Next up, we have the Canterbury Tales are next.
Yes, that's right. Our next book is the Canterbury Tales, because like we said, we did not slow down at the end of our list making here. So we have the Canterbury Tales, which we are going to read abridged. So we are going to be reading a select number of stories from the Canterbury Tales. And maybe what we can do is both put up on our community pages the stories that we're going to be reading. Mm-hmm. So that way, if you guys want to read some of the Canterbury Tales with us, we will be doing that. And like we did with this one, we will try and put up the link for the live show for that a couple weeks in advance so that you guys can read those stories as well if you like. And then we will finish this cycle off with Sula by Toni Morrison. So, and that'll be interesting. So final thoughts, Kurt was saying, yeah, we talked about this when they're back to back. They sometimes don't show up. Kurt liked that quote. And have a good day as well, Kurt. You're very welcome, Doug. Hello, Carrie, and thank you. And Kurt was saying some of the Canterbury Tales are body. Yes, I'm fully expecting that because yeah, there's a certain time period where that's like all you're getting.
We looked up which are the ones that are most commonly taught in schools, but I'm also curious to know, so which ones do they not include in schools?
Yeah, that would be, we're going to have to see. We're going to have to
maybe we'll each have to do a random selection of not on the reading list.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that is it for today, guys. Thank you for anyone who watched this. Thank you to all of you who were here live with us. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to leave your thoughts on any of this in the comments below. And we will see you both on our channels in between and whenever we do our next live show. All right. So that's it. Bye, everyone.